We will call this meeting to order, and I'll begin, as we are all remote, we'll begin with a roll call of the committee members. Alan Baker.
Here.
Amar Clark.
Here.
Bob Hassinger.
I seem to be here now.
And Dave Robbins is here, and Bob Carroll hopefully will be joining us shortly, but if not, we do have a quorum. And we'll proceed with our agenda. The first agenda item, as always, is public input. This is for any member of the public who happens to be attending the meeting and has something to speak on that is not already on the committee's agenda. I don't have any Zoom attendees, and unless one of our Zoom panelists wants to bring something up in the way of public input, we will proceed with our next agenda item, which is an update from town administrator. It's our routine agenda item. Evan did not have much of anything for me. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. The only thing he really wanted to include on this meeting's agenda is our next topic, the Wi-Fi hotspot discussion. I can relay to you that there are a couple of things that Evan is anticipating bringing to the committee's attention in the future. One is, we're probably overdue for a meetup with the Charlie and Company, the town's IT vendor. It's been a while since we've touched base with them and heard about what they're up to. We'll be scheduling that for sometime later this year, July, August, September, probably. Evan he also mentioned IT policies as something he wants to work with us on at some point. He didn't have a definite schedule for that, just something it's on his radar. And the other thing is town meeting clickers.
So real quick before you get the town meeting clicker, so that might be a longer discussion. Did Evan give any indication as far as IT policies, if this is talking about more along the lines of things like data governance or policies regarding things like hardening of systems or infrastructure or such, or is this like procedural policies, or what does he mean by IT policies?
We didn't get into that in the conversation. He used the word policies, and that, as you know, that could cover a lot of territory.
Okay.
So when Evan is, I'm sure at some point, Evan will be drilling down into that and sort of trying to come up with some focus as to what he wants to talk with us about and when. I think it's probable that some guidance from us as to topics that ought to be covered in policies of various kinds would probably be helpful to Evan. And so that's something we might want to think about a little bit on our own, sort of be proactive about that and have some suggestions or recommendations to Evan as to the scope of various policies that we think might be worth pursuing.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I was asking that question, because at one point we had talked about putting together like discussion around whether or not we should make recommendations along the lines of NIST best practices for government, municipal governments and such. And I remember I had pulled together a bunch of information, but we never ended up having that discussion. So I know that there's several things that can be covered there if there's interest, but I just wasn't sure what was meant by policies.
Yes, I'm not sure to the extent to which Evan has really thought through what he's particularly interested in with respect to policies, which is kind of why I suggest maybe we could be a little bit proactive on that, at least help Evan sort of scope out what can fall into that general category, and he'll probably have to prioritize as to what's particular policies that he may want to pursue. So with respect, going back to the topic of clickers then, as most of us know, the clicker system ended up simply not working for the Maytown meeting. The story that I have, to the extent that I have any information on that, which is pretty limited, is that the the clicker system software just would not run. It would not keep running. He said it would start up and then it would crash, or start up, and as soon as I did anything with it, it would crash. Evan seemed to think maybe it was an incompatibility with the recent version of Windows. I think he mentioned Windows 11, but I'm not positive. But I haven't, offered to follow up on that with them. You guys, I'm sure you recall that I spent a great deal of time with that clicker system 2 or 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago. My goodness. And, sort of figuring out why it was not working well for us. I get the impression from Evan and William that their preference is to abandon the system we have, go with another system. I think the name of the other system is Meridia, but I'm not positive. And that would be a system that is, oh, Evan is online with us. Evan. All right, Evan, will do. Well, good evening, Evan.
Hey, everybody, how are you?
I didn't expect you here.
No, I'm here. I told you I was coming.
I thought when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago, you said you were not going to be able to make the 14th.
Oh, well, then I'll just go then.
I mean, I'm not about to kick you out. I'm happy you're here because so we're on the topic of update from town administrator, and I've mentioned
Great.
that a couple of things that you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago, meeting with Charlie and company at some point later this year.
Yep.
You had mentioned the topic of policies as something that you would like to bring to our attention at some point. We were just talking about that a few minutes ago. I don't know if you were listening in on that.
I was, yes.
Yeah,
I would love clarification on what you mean by policies there.
Sure. So we have a number of, outdated policies like WISP policy, use of town equipment policies, and then and there's others too. I'm just not thinking of them top of mind. What my plan is to grab what we have, put it together in like a packet, and then send that out to all of you to show you what we have, and then start talking about what needs to be updated and what we're missing. But I also want to work on with you folks, kind of expands beyond policy, which is an evergreen plan of sorts for making sure we don't find ourselves in the position we were 2 years ago, where everything is obsolete at the same time and nothing works. There should be a capital plan of sorts, but generally they're referred to as evergreen plans, where we're cycling new equipment in and new technologies and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you're looking basically for two different components, but both under the word policy. The latter part of that is generally a sustaining service type of policy that generally fits into like an ITSM framework, with creating a roadmap of here's the end of life schedule for, or end of support or end of licensing schedules for your various services, licenses, and hardware. And then doing is, and then so that literally it's exactly the same thing I just did all the way to 2029 just the other day, planning out what our big purchases are for the next couple of years at my university. So it's a very good practice to get into. The first part of that, when you're talking about like rehashing some of the procedures or policies or stuff, I don't know what part you came in earlier on, but one of the things I said earlier is that there's actually a NIST cybersecurity framework that's built around municipalities that generally covers things from security to also best use or practice of municipality resources and such. And so maybe the whole thing doesn't have to be like hammered in, but that might be a good start for then creating or recreating the policies that you're looking for out of that for best industry best practices and such. But we can talk
Yeah.
about that later in a future month.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I could use, that's not the policy world that I generally inhabit, so any help that we can get on that would be welcome.
Yeah, I think that, as I said before, among, together with all of us in the committee, I'm sure we have probably can provide a number of observations about, the topics that should be covered by policy. And, we've got a set of existing policies that some of which may be old and outdated, but between what we have, updates that may be appropriate, policies that we may be missing. Yeah, I think we'd be delighted to help out with that.
Great.
And we were talking about clickers, and
Yeah.
it's my impression that between you and William, you're pretty much committed to getting to going with a new clicker system. I was beginning to talk about if I remember, it was Meridia was the system you were looking at, which is used by a lot of towns here in Massachusetts for town meetings.
Right. So we're starting there. We're going to look at pretty much anything that's out there that has a vendor network here in Massachusetts. But Meridia has been really growing by leaps and bounds in Massachusetts in this realm. So the chair of our finance committee is also the town administrator of Groton, and they had just made the switch over to Meridian and Meridia, and was just thrilled with the equipment. It's a lot more user friendly. It's all plug and play, and it just we obviously we weren't able to use them at the last town meeting. That was just briefly summarized. So we were all set to go. Everything was working. Tested it on a Friday because the town meeting's coming up the following week. And there's a HASP, it's called. It's like a little USB looking thing, and that cooked itself. So we had that overnighted, and then when we got it, it wasn't provisioned correctly. So then we had to have them remote in and provision it. And then everything was working again for all of our various tests. And then we got to town meeting at 5. Well, we were there earlier, but when we were testing again at 5:30, it just kept glitching out the software and freezing up. And they did not, there's no way to troubleshoot that at 5:30. So we, obviously we were going through that, and then we started talking to, Mark Haddad about, how it wasn't working. And he had just told us that his system is basically, there's no hasps, there's no any of that stuff. It all just, you turn it on and it talks to each other, and then away you go. So we're going to do a demo of that, hopefully, in the next month or so, and, just see what they have to offer. We definitely need something with an easier interface. Not so much because we can't figure it out, because I don't know if Dave mentioned, but he had written it's 109 pages, I think, Dave, of how to use
Something like
this.
that.
Yes, it's very involved. So I'm hopeful that, when we get the new system, I'm sure that there's some proprietary components of it, but by and large, in 2023, you can figure out your way around a lot of these basic softwares, right? I can use the accounting software, even though I'm not in it every day, and payroll, and because they all have the same basic, functionality, or point to the same places. I know the gear is my settings, just stuff like that. And I'm assuming that this new software would be like that. So we're excited. It has been a tremendous amount of work each and every time we've done it. And so I'm hopeful that this will streamline that process, and we'll be able to.
Yeah, I took
together at a time.
Evan, after you and I met and you mentioned that, I found Meridia, their website, and just took a very quick look at that. And I think, yeah, I would like to spend more time with that because I know what the old system was like, and Meridia sounds like they've, I mean, they're also like ARS, they are sort of their target market overall is the broader market of audience response systems, but they seem to have a system, a package that's tailored specifically for use at town meetings like ours, and that was one of my problems with ARS, is that their system really wasn't designed for the town meeting application. And my hope is that Meridia is, and I'm certainly willing and able to take a close look at that, because I've got a good point comparison, having studied that ARS system in a great deal of detail. But the hardware side of Meridia, as far as the clickers themselves are concerned, is not all that different from the ARS clickers in terms of the radio aspects and the basics of how the clickers communicate with the base station. Just from my brief read, it looks like they're using a somewhat similar radio technology, maybe more modern, but the important part really is the software,
Right,
to be really designed specifically to support the town meeting application. So I'm sure, I and maybe the rest of us would be would be very interested in getting into that in more detail, to help understand how the new system is likely to work better for us.
Yeah.
excellent.
I helped Dave a little bit around the edges of what he was doing when we had the other runaround. It just, how did when it started, and I always wondered, well, how did the previous system get picked, and the decision to buy more clickers, then there was no one to go back to who really had any confidence to figure out what mostly Dave found. They just weren't, as far as I could tell, they weren't even really working on it. So this really gives me a headache. We spent a lot of money. I wonder how much money we have in the current system. Might think about that and think about how much money you're going to look to spend on the new system, or a new system, and have some sort of real support and assured long life, longer, kind of more like the hardware life than the current release of Windows kind of life. But some sort of a committed, capable support, ongoing support and commitment for it'll keep running.
Yeah, I imagine that if we wanted to, we could spend more time with that current system and figure out why it wasn't working for us in that evening, and maybe get that straightened out and something that we can be confident in. But if this new system is going to overall be a better fit for town meeting applications, not so sure that we want to put any more effort into the old one.
I feel like there's been so many different town meetings over the years that the clickers have just been problematic. They are not very reliable. So if you have a better solution coming in, that's affordable and more reliable, and that's easier to use, I mean, seems like it's a winner, really.
Yeah, so we'll weigh all that out. I mean, that's part of our normal process. We look at kind of that sunk cost of what we've got into the current system, I do know that the Meridia system that the town of Groton got was this newer system. And with 600 clickers, it was, I want to say $18,000, which, sounds like a lot of money, but in this world kind of is not. So, I think, we'll weigh that out. I mean, the whole point is they have to work. So, if we've got, 30,000 into the old system, but it only works 20% of the time, then, we're just holding on to that number for no real reason. So, yeah, Bob, yeah, rest assured, we're going to, do our math on that and our due diligence, and
Yeah,
not just abandon it because we don't want to put the time into it. We won't.
I think about how you might be able to get some value out of the current system. Maybe there are people out there that need clickers or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You sell it as is, not guaranteed to run.
Yeah. Well, our plan is if we do like the new system and it seems like it's a value add, then we'll put the old system on Municipid, and some other municipality will buy it. We'll write a real nice narrative about how great of a system it is.
Yeah. Well, again, I'll just, emphasize that the key thing that I would be looking for in the new system is how well it is designed and adapted for the town meeting application, for the way we would like to use it. And as I said before, I was not 100% happy with the existing system, and we had to kind of shoehorn the town meeting into it.
Mhm.
Less than ideal.
Yes. So that's kind of it, I think, on the clickers. The other big project that we have undertaken is we redid all of the municipal center security camera, both the hardware and the software side of things. We ultimately went with a company called Verkada. They have a really plug and play interface, which is great for staff that are not used to this type of interface, and they don't do it very often. It's very user friendly. It also allows us to build out a alert system. So come July, we're going to be adding panic buttons to every office. So right now we only have them in a couple, but we're going to add them to all of them because they interface right with our camera system. So it becomes real short money. We're not paying a monthly fee and all of that anymore. So we're gonna keep building that out. We're also doing new cameras at the police department. I do believe that they're gonna not be on the same system we are. Originally, that was our hope, but we have different end uses for these cameras. So what we're using them for is not the same as what PD uses them for, and they have a whole bunch of record retention laws to follow and a whole bunch of other things. So I think we'll ultimately look at another product for them. The nice thing about Verkada, which is why we went with them, is the scalability is super simple. As long as you can get, PoE somewhere and then back out to the internet, you can see that camera. So, if we add cameras to the exterior of fire or any of these other kind of remote locations, it's just much less expensive than kind of the competition there. So we're pretty excited about that. They work really well.
So a quick question on that.
Sure.
One of the things that I've been seeing in the industry a little bit recently is malicious actors actually targeting cameras that are on the that are available off the internet, that they're reachable from the internet. They oftentimes have worse security functionality or features on them. How are these, with these being on the internet, what type of protection is set up on these to prevent other bad actors from being able to reach them?
You know, Alan, if I told you, I'd be making it up. So, I don't have enough information
Okay,
top of mind. I mean, again, we met with the folks, we vetted some other systems. You know, they talk about security and all the things that they're doing. I can give that to you. I just can't tell you verbatim right now how that works because that's not what I internalize.
no,
Uh,
that's fine, and I get that. That's just the one thing
Mhm.
with cameras traditionally have been in lockdown networks, and since this is a cloud service,
Right.
it's kind of counterproductive for that. And so that's just the one thing that I would recommend, just double checking to make sure that they're not exposed or putting any privacy at risk.
Right. And so one of the we had, you know, that conversation. Again, I don't know enough about the tech side of it to speak intelligently on it, but you know, part of the our application is our application is fairly low risk because we only have cameras in public areas. So it's not like you know, there's no camera inside a HR office.
Okay.
You know, it's not like we have it in our, you know, like your Ring camera in your living room that people hack into to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's in the hallway of town hall. So if they hacked into it, you know, worst case scenario is that they somehow, you know, make
They,
it so that it's inoperable for us
yeah.
and we can't get back to it.
So they could either crash it, or in some cases, these cameras can be used as a jump off point to get access to other things on the internal network, is the
Yep.
other risk here.
Yep. And I think, and I will double check this, but I think that I believe that this is its own standalone network.
Okay.
But again, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. So I know that we took the old system, we trashed that. It's all PoE back to its own proprietary patch panel and switch. I bought a separate switch for this. I after that, I don't know. I mean, I think our original, the original conversation when we were doing this was to, and I know I'm going to use the word firewall differently, but to put a firewall between our network where all of our data lives and then this device that's going out into the world.
Okay. It just, yeah, it doesn't have to be answered on here. Just a recommendation from me, just to make sure that that was covered. And if it was, then it's great.
Absolutely. And when we get CMD in here, that's definitely a question of, you know, I used to have more time to play with this stuff, and now
Then you got busy with your real job. Yeah.
Right. Now
Exactly.
I order stuff and then it gets put in and it works, and then I guess that's fine.
Yep. You can't be as hands-on as you'd like to be, I imagine.
No, and I like doing that stuff a little bit,
I
but
know you do.
so the only other project we have coming up really that's major, again, this is June, so all our money is gone. We're gonna wait for July when we can start doing some new projects, but you know, we're upgrading starting in July the PD's phone system. So if you recall back, I redid the phone system at town hall because system we had was no longer supported. It had once been shared by the school department. School department had long since upgraded. And so we wound up going with the same system and vendor that the school department does. So we live in two tandem places, but we have failover to each. You know, we can fail over to the school, school can fail over to us. We tried to do that with police and fire. Fire didn't want to come on with school in town. They wanted to stay on with police. So we upgraded their system, and now their system does not doesn't fail over to the police system because the police system is from 2016. And so we're upgrading that hardware as well. Once that's done, you know, we all, every department now has upgraded phone systems with failover to other municipal buildings and or the cloud. So
So just
So, yeah,
to
that's-
just to be clear, you're saying that, so while like the municipal center and the schools can fail over each other. The fire and the police phone systems will be able to fall over to each other once you do the upgrade to the police
Correct.
system. Yeah, so
Right.
two separate environments, but both
Correct.
have redundancy built in.
And we can, I don't know if this is the correct term, we can spoof the PD through town hall to, so there is functionality there, but it's not, instantaneous failover like the school and the towns have. I mean, we should, if something happened to the school system, it should fail over onto ours or vice versa. And we really shouldn't know it as far as what the end user sees on their desk.
So when you say fail, you can spoof it. The two systems are not joined, but you can do outbound calls with the DID for the police
Right.
department. All right.
Yep. And so anyways, long story short, they're a little bit siloed more than I would have liked, but I think we have enough, redundancy and forethought that, I think we're in pretty good shape there. So, and then the biggest IT thing is going to be our new radio system, but won't get into that here. But that's going to suck up a lot of our IT bandwidth in the next year to 2 years.
You're talking about like radio frequencies for the different
PD,
departments. Yeah.
PD and fire. Yeah, it's we're doing that regional dispatch project, so that's going to spool up. Probably close to a $5 million spend just in Grafton. We're still running on copper lines. That's the failover for our radio system, and Verizon no longer supports them. So
they're going out to DSL now. Yeah, I've been dealing with that. We just had to redo our radio environment on campus as well for our police department and such. Same thing. Verizon doesn't support the copper. They're switching to DSL, so had to get rid of the analog lines for that.
Yeah, so we have that project coming up, which will actually, it'll be a rough couple of years as we, be a ton of meetings and trying to navigate all of this. And but once we get up and running, it should actually result in a lot less strain on our current IT infrastructure and budget, because all of that gets offloaded to the regional licensing, maintenance, everything. So then we can just focus on our core network that we have, and hopefully that's that.
You're down to 2 towns for the regional.
Correct. Yep.
But that hasn't, I saw that it was down, but I didn't see anything about, but we're going forward, anyway.
They'll take that vote on the 20th. I don't get the sense that has changed. I mean, I think our and I don't want to go too far off of your meeting here, Dave, but I think that, overall the amount we'll save operationally year over year will decrease. It'll still be a net savings, but it won't be, obviously if you have 10 towns, the net savings is going to be better. But where we're really going to make a lot of savings for Grafton is in the 911 grant process, which is, pay for our entire radio network at $5 million. The radios that the police carry are $10K a piece. We have 30 plus, plus fire, plus, I mean, it's the MDTs in the cars, the fire trucks, all of that. So, there's going to be some real savings on that side of the house. So, we just were at Metacomet yesterday, and looking at what they're doing and talking to the chief from Mendon, who's a member there and loves it, and was actually highlighting the IT improvements that his PD has seen that they wouldn't have afforded otherwise. So pretty cool stuff.
Did I see that we're doing body cams?
We are.
When will they be?
They're in use now, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we got
how often
yeah, that was a grant that the police were able to get. So we did just use some capital money to, or it might have been earmark money. I'd have to look at my notes, but we just bought some more cameras as backup, but we want to say the grant was around $50,000, which was enough to pay for the cams themselves, plus the storage device, and everything else that, goes along with that. So, I think, I would have pushed for body cams when I got to Grafton if they weren't already 2 steps ahead of me, going down that road. So they were, it was nice. There wasn't really any major pushback. Some departments have seen that. We did do the stipend route. Everything's bargainable because they're all union employees. But, that aside, pretty straightforward process. And I think that, Grafton PD has the foresight to see that while it's great for accountability, it's also great for protection of the officer as well, if they're doing their jobs correctly. And, I often said that I've been doing this for 9 years, only had 5 real major complaints, PD related, and all of them would have been solved within 30 seconds if I could have watched the video of the interaction.
Yeah,
Honestly, because you get to know people, and so you get to know, like, well, this person's generally, the most calm person I've ever met. This doesn't sound like it is them. Are they having a bad day? You don't know any of that. So this is a great way to solve that. And because we got the grant, we're not on the hook for the storage component, because there is a certain amount of time that everything has to be kept, and these cameras are auto download and all the rest of it. So yeah, we're in good shape there. And
I'm really glad to hear that. YouTube's been sending me all these videos about accountability stuff around, and some places have cameras and some don't. And
Yep.
places that do, I think that's the way I'd like it to be, even though there are sides to that, I guess.
Yep. I mean, I always told the officers that, look, you're going to be recorded, and it's just as well for us to have a version of that that we know is clean. So, it's a double-edged sword. But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then all it's going to show is that you're on the up and up and doing your job. So,
Great.
I'm a big fan of body cams.
Great.
So, and I think that's all I got.
I had a question. I wanted
Sure.
to follow up from a previous month where I
Oh,
think, well, you weren't here, but we received updates from you via Dave.
Yeah.
The previous month, it was said that the Office 365 rollout had been stalled because there was problems with trying to receive a municipality tenant from Microsoft. Is that still an issue, or is that something that's been resolved?
Yep.
So,
Still an issue. And so the current issue is that they've issued a tenant to Grafton PD, which.
and they can't have more than one for Grafton.
Correct.
Yeah, I've run into this with vendors before.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have a rep, and we're working through it, and if we knew this was going to be the outcome, we would have just set everything up differently. But it's just a hassle. Everything is turnkey ready to go. So as soon as we straighten out this tenant issue, we'll be ready to go. I'm hopeful that we have that by July 1, but I was also hopeful that we had it by Thanksgiving of last year. So
I was gonna say,
I thought I was going to sail through this meeting without having to bring that up.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's the bane of our existence right now in the realm, because we've done staff training. We're ready to go. So
Yeah, if Ellen hadn't asked, I was gonna.
yeah, okay.
just Not to harass you or anything, Evan, just to satisfy our curiosity as to where.
I'm gonna get a, I gotta get a background that says your connection is unstable and just duck out of this.
So you
But
can
yeah,
add,
no.
like, you can change your name in Zoom to be connecting ... and
Yeah.
turn off your camera.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, no, I mean, it's very frustrating for us and, you know, embarrassing to not be able to hit our timelines. But yeah, it's largely out of our hands. And so, you know, we just keep getting pushed out and out and out. PD is provisioned, so they're working on Office 365 and all of that. So it's just the town hall side. So
Okay, with
Well,
that,
well, yeah, we'll get there.
with that, Fiona and John,
Yeah.
your turn.
All right. I'm gonna jump off because I'm technically on vacation. I'm gonna go put the little one to bed.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us this evening, Evan.
Absolutely. You know, I do wish that I remembered telling you I couldn't make it. But you know, I'm kidding. No, I always appreciate all that you folks do and for taking the time to meet with me. So, yeah.
I'd actually put in the minutes that you weren't going to be able to be here, so I had to like change that.
And then I just appeared. So,
Well, enjoy the rest of your vacation.
thank you. And good luck, John and Fiona, and I will see you when I come back.
Good luck. You're going to need it.
Enjoy your vacation.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
All righty. So I think John, we should probably start with some quick intros because there's a couple of very familiar faces for me, but a couple of new faces too. So hi, everybody. I am Fiona Coughlin. I am the town planner here in Grafton. I have been in Grafton 6 months next week. So still getting to know people, obviously, and still, you know, I guess probably not still getting the lay of the land, but still, you know, just meeting more people every day. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to speak to you all. John, do you want to say a quick hi?
Hi, I'm John Allen. I'm the Economic Development Specialist for the town. As the Economic Development Specialist, I try and bring businesses to town to expand the tax base and also to improve the employment and the quality of life. And like Fiona, I don't know Alan or Mar. I am familiar with David and Bob, but not clearly as well as Fiona.
Yes, we spend a lot of time together, Dave, Bob, and I. So Dave, if I can share my screen, I'll just pull up the PowerPoint. It might just be easier to use that.
Yep. I believe I enabled screen sharing for you.
Great. Okay, yes. Let me just get it actually into the right mode. So you'll all come to realize fairly quickly that I am not tech savvy.
None of us are.
So I
either.
apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah,
None of us are.
If I come off as saying something that sounds like super rudimentary to you all and seems very complex to me, I apologize in advance. So, but okay, so hello everyone, I'm Fiona. I'm glad to be meeting with you all today. Today we're going to talk about our Wi-Fi hotspot project. So this essentially, oh actually, sorry, jumping ahead here. So essentially we have been, here we go. So John and I have been working on this together. We received $100,000, we being the town, received $100,000 in ARPA funds to spend. So what we've been doing is looking at our local rapid recovery plan, which is basically our economic development plan for the town. And it was an effort that was undertaken to help communities essentially spend their ARPA funds. So it seemed logical to kind of look there for spending purposes. So what we've been doing is reviewing the plan. We met, John and I, we also met the EDC we met with the EDC and kind of talked through how to best utilize these ARPA funds. And basically what we found was that out of all of the priorities listed in the local rapid recovery plan, we thought that the Whitney Park / Mill Street Park revitalization was something that we could dedicate our time and resources to in a way that makes sense, that we can meet the deadline, as well as recruitment of businesses. And of course, the reason why we're here, adding public Wi-Fi hotspots around town. So that's kind of the background of how we kind of started thinking about this. And kind of why we're here today. But I wanted to just talk about an interesting resource that I found. And if this is a resource that is familiar to all of you, please forgive, but it was a interesting data resource that's published by MBI. I don't know if you can you still see my screen?
We can.
Is it the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, hold on one second. So, one moment, stop sharing, and then I will reshare my new. So I was looking through, trying to understand, where Grafton is at in terms of coverage and kind of how we can be strategic about where we put our Wi-Fi hotspots, because there's a lot of things that are going to come into play, I think, especially because we have a limited amount of funds, A, and B, we have a timeline that we need to implement the plan and our priorities and spend the money by, which is essentially, I believe it's September of 2026. So I was looking through and I noticed this is a really cool site, and you can basically toggle between census tract data for the town, and you can see how coverage speeds vary, competition varies, number of providers, et cetera. So if you can hover over the census tract, you can zoom in and see the data here. Number of providers, maximum speeds, and it also goes into some socioeconomic demographics like race, household income, age. But it's really interesting because it seemed like North Grafton was a key target area based on this data. But I know that North Grafton has been receiving attention in terms of development, et cetera, as of late. So this is just something that I wanted to show you all, to just kind of let you know that, we were looking at statewide data and trying to understand, where maybe the digital divide is most stark / ways that we can be creative with these Wi-Fi hotspots. So let me go back to the presentation. So basically, this is where we're at with the project, is that we have been speaking to folks, hence why we're here today. Folks that we've spoken to include the Economic Development Commission. The Planning Board is aware of this project. We've been talking a lot with the Town Administrator's Office. John has been helping me out significantly, talking to other communities who have implemented similar programs to this. I've met with Bob, I've met with Dave, of course. And today we really just need to hear from the experts, who would be you. How can we do this in a way that makes sense? How can we, capitalize on maybe existing infrastructure, et cetera? So before I give, John a moment to speak about what he was able to find out in his conversations, I wanted to brief you all about what we kind of know right now. So we know the Common, Mill Villages Park, and Whitney Park would be kind of our target public spaces, at least at this time. Understanding that Whitney Park / Mill Street Park in North Grafton would need some significantly more investment than probably Mill Villages Park and the Common, because it seems to me like the infrastructure and the connections that we would need for those two areas is basically already in place. But feel free to correct me once we start having the discussion. Bob made me aware of the municipal fiber optic access network. So I would like to pick your brains about that once John says his piece. And essentially what else we know at this point is that you can either, and this is where I'm going to really show how much I don't know, but we can either fiber slice, do point-to-point connections, or set up a physical utility box that the town owns and establish connection that way. So that was kind of what we understood would be the three really avenues to get this done. We want to obviously capitalize on the infrastructure of the municipal network that's in place, and we're looking at these areas. So John, before I keep blabbing on, maybe you can just give a brief summary of the conversations that you had, because I know you spoke directly to the town's IT
Okay.
team, et cetera.
Sure. Our goal when we took on this project was to establish Wi-Fi by Mill Street Park, what's also known as Whitney Park, but basically it's the rectangle piece of grand land near Washington Mills. Ideally, we wanted to set the Wi-Fi there. We felt that that's an area that could benefit because economically it's not as prosperous as other sections of town. In addition, we thought that would make a significant quality of life. When we looked at it, one of the challenges we had was there was no way that things could be electrified in the park. What we could do is, there's a fire station there, so we could put a cable box there and try and project out a Wi-Fi, but that would be very limited. Just because you're losing, say, 50 feet to the fire station and then another 75 feet. Well, 50 feet to the fire station, then another 40 feet for the road. So you weren't going to be able to electrify that much of the park. And then when you looked at the cost to electrify other sections to get the nodes there for the points, it became quite expensive because I'm told that they would have to do it underground and after bringing in a contractor, digging the hole. It just got totally out of control. So we still like the idea of providing public Wi-Fi. So when we looked at the town common, that made a lot more sense, especially given that the town owns one common. The belief is that we could simply put the cable box there, and because there's electricity at the park already, we could use that to get to our points of contact to increase the Wi-Fi spread. When we look at the park in South Grafton, that's a little bit more complex, where we'd have to build a metal cage to house the cable box, but there is electricity there to help facilitate the spread of the Wi-Fi. The one question we don't know about South Grafton is how close is it to cable or fiber so we could project that hotspot. We found out from the city of Boston that tying into lights, street lights doesn't work well at all. Only because one, if you're electrifying it with the lights, when the lights aren't on, you have no electricity. The other thing is if they tried using batteries as a way to solve that problem, but then that became a maintenance issue. So that's pretty much a summary of where we stand. So our recommendation, or at least our goal, is to try and do South Grafton and the town common. But what we'd like to do is use this opportunity to say, from your perspective, your knowledge and your experience, are we on the right track?
Yeah, so I actually live right down the street. Like I walk to Whitney Park. And when you listed these three, Whitney Park is not like the other ones. The other two parks have commonly have people who are there purposely to be there. Winnie Park generally has pass-through traffic. Occasionally someone is sit at the bench. It's more of a memorial for someone that's there than an area that people congregate or there's other stuff going on. And the fire station is pretty far away. There's no way the wireless would work very well from the fire station, like you said. So I agree with your assessment that rolling that out, because it's going to be too expensive. You would have to run fiber. You would have to probably dig up the street to get that there. And that's a very costly, cost prohibitive type thing, especially for very limited gain. I'm not sure if Bob or Dave have more knowledge as far as where the fiber and such are closer in as far as around Mill Village Park. I have a question as far as in the commons. So you said that you're likely going to put the cable box into one common, the townhouses, the townhouse there, to have it come the fiber fed to that. How are you going to get the service to the common from that point? Are you looking at doing a wireless mesh from that point across the common, or were you having fiber run out to the common? Or from there?
I'm told that I could do, Bob,
No, finish what you were gonna say, but
I'm told that I could basically set up a relay system to do it. So it gets relayed from one point to another point and then projected and relayed to another point.
It's basically a wireless mesh. What you have is you have a root bridge or access point that is basically the connection feed, and then all the other APs mesh with each other to provide connectivity back wirelessly. Generally, they'll have multiple antennas, one that's being used for the purpose of establishing the mesh, and the other ones for providing service to users. And I actually have several APs here that I do that exact same thing in my house today. So that's I was kind of trying to figure out where you're going with that. There are some deteriorations of service the further you get away from the root box, but I mean, for free Wi-Fi, I don't know that that's going to be a considerable issue.
Yeah, I think Bob may be able to speak to the existing fiber connections at those parks.
Great.
a little bit more. Yeah, I negotiated for supervised design of and construction of what we actually call FMAN, FMAN, Fiber Municipal. That's this network, I guess.
Fiber Municipal Area Network. I think
Yeah,
you're calling it.
Area
yeah,
network.
that's what it stands for, municipal area network.
So I'm very familiar, or was, we haven't done much recently, but I know what we did with that network, how we did it, the people that we would, the people who currently maintain the system and have been the ones who made additional connections for us. And assuming the same folks are still there, I could be probably quite a lot of help. The network, the Mill Villages Park, there's a box out by the street where utilities come to, and then there's an underground path, and I think we could go through it to the little structure there, the whatever you call it,
Pavilion.
the pavilion, and there's connections, assuming nothing has changed since I last looked at it a while ago. There's power in the pavilion, and there's the connection to the FMAN in the pavilion, and there's a connection there set up so that our cable access could go through it, and have, I think we have to do live from there. So you have a lot of the elements. The pavilion would be the place I'd picture just setting up a whatever access point. I'm not an expert on the finer modern opportunities mesh network or whatever. On the common, we have a similar situation. There's what used to be in the wooden box on the tree near the gazebo is all now, I assume, in that bright new metal box near the east entrance, the Upton Street entrance. Fiber there, the F-man fiber there, obviously power there. And I think we also still have a coax drop there from our old network. There's got, since the power goes from there to the gazebo, there must be conduit to do that. And I didn't get to watch any of that, but we can check into it. As far as Whitney Park goes,
Hold on a second. You just lost both of the attendees.
we need
Oh, no.
better internet.
Ah,
Amar's internet infected them. It's a
I know.
virus. It's
I
a
know.
rare virus that transmits over Zoom meetings.
It must be on Fios.
it's odd that the two of them would drop off at the same time.
Oh, here comes John.
John's coming back.
They must be on Charter, not Verizon.
Maybe so. I'm on Fios.
Oh, you're on Fios?
I am on Fios.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. See, we've got good pictures, all three of us. Because we're all on Fios. I got on Fios the day it came by.
Yeah, same.
Actually, no. I kept my copper phone line though when I put Fios in, so I had two lines because I didn't. I wanted to have the copper. Anyway, let's see. Well, we had, and he disappeared again.
So John's still there, but his screen went away.
I'm here and I can hear you guys.
Okay.
All right.
What about?
So
No.
you were talking about the fiber and the comments, and that there's a conduit. There used to be a conduit.
Is Fiona?
Fiona cut out as well, and she's calling back in. I think she's doing the cell phone based on us trading
Okay,
text.
Let's see if we can get her back.
All right, she's on her way.
If only we had public Wi-Fi that they could use for this meeting.
Yeah, we could put it on every pole, right? Right next to the 5G connections that we have on every pole. There's John. How is Fiona doing? Technology.
Anyone here know anything about technology?
Technology.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I guess this justifies the need.
I'm not quite sure about that, but this has been given quite a lot of thought actually in past times too.
David, you might have it looks like there's an attendee.
Yeah, that's probably Fiona on the phone.
Yeah, well, it's a phone that doesn't say it's a phone number. Talking.
On timing, I'm assuming it's.
Anyway, if Fiona could let us know her talking is permitted.
Yes, that is Fiona's phone number.
Okay. If she can speak up and say
Yeah.
that it's there, all she has to do is figure out how to make that work. Can you hear us, Fiona?
She's not showing as a panelist. but maybe you can't make a person a phone call in a panelist. I don't know.
No. No,
but she's showing muted.
I have enabled her for talking,
Okay.
and I don't know how to unmute when you're on the phone into Zoom.
Yeah, but there's star something. Because now we have 2 copies of John, or I do.
More John, the better. So on the phone.
All right,
you should be able to you should be able to
Star 6.
That's what I was gonna say. Yes, star 6.
All right, star 6. Hello, Fiona. Star 6. No luck.
All right,
Sorry,
one
one
sec.
sec.
One second. Let me just, we're texting, so I'm not sure who that's calling. That's calling the wrong person. 1 second.
Yeah, so John, you're on your phone still on this meeting as well as your
Yeah.
computer.
Fiona saying she could hear everyone and they need to promote her to speak.
Yes, I have her enabled for talking. I can't unmute her,
Star
but
6.
She has to hit star 6, I think, to unmute.
Star 6, or can,
There
Yeah.
she is.
No.
She's
Hello?
got it.
yes, we
Whoa.
hear
Hear
you.
me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, sorry. It was me that had to press star 6.
Okay, did you, can we now pick up here?
Yes.
Here-
So when I got cut off, we were talking about the metal box that's in place in the common.
Yes, and that there has to be a path underground from there to the gazebo, obviously, because the electricity runs from there to the gazebo. There may be a little more stories with that, but that's enough for now. We, I believe we do have a fiber drop into One Grafton Common, One Grafton Common. And we definitely have fiber drop into the library. So we have a good bit to start with for that. Whitney Park, I'd have to look at our map, but I think that we'd have to add a bit of fiber to get there. I don't think we went that far. We go up to
I
airport.
think you're right, John.
Does
I
the,
think you're right. It would need to be extended for Whitney Park.
Right.
It definitely allowed us to do this in the common, of course, as you mentioned, and mill villages. But when I looked, I couldn't find an online version of the map. We could only find a paper version. But yeah, we would need to extend the infrastructure to make that work,
Right.
which I just don't think we can afford.
forward?
Well, where did you get the price? As I say, I had a lot to do with this. And we always anticipated adding, as the town needed additional connections.
Well,
That's possible.
we started with the assumption that the
May I-
fire station had fiber.
They gonna have to check.
But even
They
if
should.
even though the fire station, assuming the fire station has fiber, the problem is without the park being electrified, the cost to electrify it is just outside of our budget, so it becomes a non-starter.
So there are lights at that park.
Tell me about your budget.
We have a
John,
budget.
you spoke. We spoke to Jonathan of who's the town, the town IT's consultant who he had
CMD.
given us a ballpark estimate so that
What-
we could get an idea of what we were essentially getting ourselves into, because we only have $26,000 of ARPA funds to dedicate to this. So my understanding, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, was that Mill Street could easily tip us over, we could be looking at potentially 15,000 is what I recall him saying, but John, you might be able to speak to that. Because you spoke to him since.
Right. Well, just talking with the building department, just to get the sections electrified as needed, we already hit $15,000. And that was not necessarily including everything. So once we heard that, given the budget, it became a non-starter.
Yeah, if I
I
may
think it's-
suggest something to think about going forward. One of the things, Bob described the fiber connections we've made to the Common and to Mill Villages Park. And one of the motivations for that was to allow cable to broadcast live from those locations. And we have a project that, Fiona mentioned at the beginning of the presentation to improve various improvements at Whitney Park. And sort of following up on that, if the Whitney Park improvements, and we have a somewhat limited budget for what's currently planned, but looking ahead, we may eventually decide that it's worthwhile to bring our fiber connection to Whitney Park for purposes other than Wi-Fi. So we might keep that in mind as a future direction that would then we could leverage that for the Wi-Fi at Whitney Park.
David, if I may, please. The cable fund paid for this whole F-man network. If we make a connection to make an additional connection there, like I think we did, I think it was separate that we did the South Grafton system.
I think you're right.
Then we can look at there. There's being on the cable committee. I just had my 40th appointment to the cable committee. Every year we get appointed. I don't know why. Well, I do know. I can guess why, but we don't need to get into that. Give me a break. Let's work on it and see what we can figure out to do.
Well, let me kind of make a proposal. Let's think of that money as coming from the cable fund, because when we spend the ARPA money, we have to spend the money by a certain date and time to comply with the ARPA rules. And I'm not sure if we would have that project completed timely. With the other two projects, I think we could meet the deadline.
Yeah, well, okay, don't.
Plus the cost.
Your ARPA deadline was something like, I thought, in 26. Is that what you said?
It's September 2026, Bob.
Right, and this is 23, and this sort of thing can take a couple of months. So
Okay.
let's not hold our breaths and collapse. I think that between the expertise we have on this committee, I know the network, and I've been through all this entirely. Alan and some of the others know more about the mesh networks and whatnot, to do exactly what we want to or can do in an outdoors large setting. We should be able to have a lot to do with helping this.
What type of funds do you think are available to the
Well,
cable people?
I can tell you that cable has about 2/3 of $1 million in the bank.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Now,
it seems
long
to me,
story about why and how and all that, but there's money there, and let's map out what we might like to do.
Can
So,
I?
Bob,
I'm gonna go off on a tangent.
yeah,
If
John.
we use the cable money, we could do all three parks using the cable money and then take that other 26 and allocate it elsewhere for the opera. Is that feasible?
Could be, or it could be, you have some sort of,
I mean, John, it was in our local rapid recovery plan. Do this, there's like, which is like, a byproduct of, the COVID regs and ARPA, et cetera. It's all kind of lumped in together. I think it would look good if we were implementing, priorities that were in the plan. I mean, I guess we could implement the priorities of the plan with the cable funding too, but there's a strong sense of urgency with ARPA because if you don't use it, you'll lose it. We just don't
I'm
want
wondering if maybe the ARPA funds could be used towards the Wi-Fi equipment itself, and then the cable fund maybe could cover some of the infrastructure that feeds the data into the Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I wanted to suggest to it. It seems like we could be going, and if we think in terms of the cable people, Bob's cable committee, it's yours, right, Bob? But if we think in terms of the cable committee leveraging their funds to extend the fiber network to Whitney Park, which is sort of one part. The other part that you need an infrastructure there at Whitney Park would be at least at wherever it turns out to be a suitable location for the access point, there obviously needs to be power as well. But that may tie into the other plans we're developing for the improvements at Whitney Park. But in any case, where I'm trying to get with this is that with the extension of fiber and power to Whitney Park, we then have all three parks with essentially the same type of connection available. So when you think of the design of this, you could be thinking in terms of basically the same setup in all three places. There would still be a question of where do you physically locate the access point. We've got the pavilion at Mill Villages Park. We've got the gazebo at the Common. We don't know what sort of structure we'll have available at Whitney Park as of yet, but that plan is in the works to whatever we do. And so we can kind of view those parts of it together. But in the end, I think we're looking at a design that ought to work in all three places. That could basically just about work today at the Common and Mill Villages Park because the infrastructure is all there. And at some point in the not too distant future could also work at Whitney Park once the infrastructure gets there. So if we focus this LRRP effort on the access points and the design of that and the interconnection through the FMAN, we can work with the cable folks and with this other Whitney Park improvement project to work out the details of where the infrastructure ends up there and when.
I still question, like I said before, I'm not sure, and maybe I don't know the whole history of why Whitney Park is being selected for this, but there's other parks in North Grafton. If you're trying to do one in each area, there's other parks in North Grafton that literally have a lot more people that are there regularly for various things. You have Nelson Park, which I guess is not, I don't think that's necessarily town land, that's the trust, but that has all kinds of stuff always happening there. You also have Airport Park where there's all kinds of games and stuff occurring there. Both of them have a lot more people and stuff going on than Whitney Park. I guess if you're trying to drive more business or activity to Whitney Park, then maybe this could attract it, but there's not really a lot of real estate there. It's just literally two or four benches and a bridge across the river that's set up kind of as a memorial. And it's just a way to get from the Mill side to Bridge Street side, and where that's it. So I guess I'm just not seeing what the utility for spending a lot of money to improve that particular park over other places.
Well, ideally,
and I can speak to that.
Yes,
I can speak to
Fiona.
that point. So we are currently doing a revisioning and redesign project for the Mill Street Park. It was identified as a target area in the same local rapid recovery plan. It's also been identified as an underutilized area that has that people would like to see investment in and have placemaking strategies employed there. So we are already at the same time working on this redesign effort. And I think that this is the Wi-Fi hotspots, you know, in conversations with John, EDC, planning board, et cetera, would be a logical area once, you know, the redesign comes to fruition to have the public Wi-Fi opportunities. You know, there's been a desire to really attract people to the park and beautify it and make it, you know, better than it exists currently. And I think adding, you know, this additional amenity is something that we should really strongly consider.
When we look at Mill Street Park, first thing we're talking about doing is adding seating with some shade. Second, we're talking about adding some grills so people can have cookouts and things there. There's discussions of having a bathroom there with the building.
A pavilion as well.
And a
some
pavilion
out-
as well. So although we're discussing throwing out a lot of these things, budget comes into play as well as maintenance. So if we have a bathroom, well, then there's a whole issue of opening, closing, cleaning and stuff like that. If we have money for a pavilion, there's less of a factor as far as the maintenance.
Yeah.
We want to upgrade
right,
it to try and make it an asset to the environment and the people.
I apologize. For some reason I was thinking you're talking about the other park, but you're talking about the where the playgrounds and such are on the other side of Mill Street, not where the
No,
bridge
no,
side
you
is.
got it right.
No.
No, we're talking about the fire station right across Washington Mills.
So you're not
That's
talking
fine, no.
you're not talking about Whitney Park, then you're talking about the Romney Memorial Park?
We are
No, No,
talking Whitney Park here. This was one of the top priorities that emerged from the local rapid recovery plan a couple of years ago. There was a dozen or more projects that were proposed, but the Whitney Park improvement, I think, ended up being the top priority that came out of that. And
Gotcha.
the reason was that Whitney Park was seen as being underused, and by the various improvements that we're now talking about, you know, Whitney Park was viewed as something that could be a lot more heavily used with the improvements that are being envisioned.
yeah,
Okay, so yeah, that's
it-
that's on me. I was thinking of the other park, right, like on the other side. So I take back everything I said about that. I apologize.
I'm not sure whether you landed on the right one, but yeah, the folks in North Grafton, every section of town ends up feeling that they're less well provided,
Taken care of.
taken care of. That South Grafton got the park when all of the, you know, the mill burned down, and then we have all that stuff. So we built a park down there because a lot of things came together. Now, part of the dynamic here is North Grafton. The Whitney Park is at kind of at the middle of it, and people, I think, would like to see that as, you know, that section of town divides up maybe three ways for this. There's Airport Park.
Yeah.
There's up at the library, and then there's in the middle of New England Village is this park, and this park is the one that's between the street past the fire station and the next street over. There's a playground beyond that.
You're talking about the long stretch of land between Mill Street and Overlook Street right there, that there's like literally
Correct.
nothing there,
Yes.
and it's always just okay. I got you. I understand. Like I said, that's right down the street from where, that's walking area for me to go
Yes.
there. And you're right. That area is completely not utilized at all. So I understand the appeal for that now.
Do you know Mr. Whitney, who's active in town affairs?
Yes.
It's his family. And it was, I've forgotten whether they gave it, but somehow it was, until it got forgotten, it was Whitney Park. And I think he says that there's still a thing there somewhere that says Whitney Park. And he insists we're gonna call it Whitney Park. And I'm great by that. That family, he and that family have been good to a lot of people. So that's how we get to that. There's a lot to be done here that doesn't get done on Zoom in a committee meeting. There's a lot of engineering kind of things. I'd like to, I don't think that our IT consultant is necessarily on top of everything, you know, they know what setting up some of that stuff is, but they don't necessarily know about all of the engineering and geography and existing equipment and so on, or the availability of funds that we do. I'd like to be able to help with it, but I only have a certain amount of energy, and it's being hard.
So Bob, if I could ask, so I guess one thing that I did, one thing that I did want to ask everybody, but with your knowledge of the network. So do you have an idea of roughly how much, if we were to pursue the Common and Mill Villages Park with the infrastructure as is, do you have an idea of how much that will cost? Because those seem, my understanding from this conversation is, and everyone's weigh in, is that this is feasible. We can kind of do this relatively quickly, and it seems like it's relatively inexpensive. So I guess my question is, like, roughly, does anyone on the call have an idea of how much it would cost? And does anybody have suggestions of what, like, the next steps, the next steps for John and I would need to be in terms of starting to implement this?
So your next steps should absolutely be what Bob said earlier, is you should actually do a conduit study and identify where you're going to have the fiber run through, and identify where you're going to have stuff pulled, or where you're going to have stuff run, and what you need there as far as both electricity and for fiber. The other part, as far as the equipment cost and the racks or lock boxes or such that you're going to have the host equipment, all of that is much easier once you have the infrastructure part piece put together. And honestly, in this town, Bob may be one of the best resources that's available for helping with that initial part of it. You really need to, like, what we do at my university for this type of stuff is we literally have a topology map with the actual markings of where exactly the conduit runs, where there's places there is no conduit, or where new runs have to be done, and then identify what that is. At that point, you can then find out what the pricing is to have it pulled, or if you have to do digging, it makes the cost go up a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, energy here. I'm an engineer. I start by trying to find out what we've got, and talk. Then, I would start by talking to the people. Once I know what kind of network we need to add, I'd probably start by talking to the people that I worked with to build the network and see what they had to say. But
Okay.
I don't know, we may have too many cooks, and I don't want to, I don't know whether I'm absolutely the one who should be getting in on this. But I think I need the others also. I would suggest maybe trying to meet with or touch base with the cable committee, which meets very soon, has an agenda out, but we might do this under public information, public input if we had to just chat a bit with them and get them started to on board also.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you
Who is
need,
the chair of the committee?
The cable committee meeting, for what it's worth, is a week from tomorrow night, the 22nd at 7 PM via Zoom.
Okay.
Of course, all you have to do is check the website.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we'll set up.
Was that a joke,
let
Bob?
me get on-
What's that?
Was that a joke? Check the website.
That's
So
the
we'll-
correct
we'll-
answer. That's the correct answer. Unfortunately, that's the correct answer.
Bob
okay,
Berger is
so
listed
we'll
as
plan
chair of the
to get
cable
on their
committee currently.
agenda.
Yeah,
And-
Bob,
and
Bob
then-
is, but Bob is not, we're gonna be having, no. We should not be reorganizing. Bob will be the chair of that meeting if he makes it. Otherwise, I think I'm the chair of that meeting.
Yes,
So anyway, there needs to be a base touching with Bob
Yeah.
to say, we'd like to, we have this thing, we'd like to chat about it. And oh, by the way, Bob probably has access to information that we don't have about some of these questions, what's out there.
Okay.
I
All
think you kind of start by knowing, with respect to the network connection, you need to know where the fiber termination is at these two parks that exist. Where exactly, what, and something about what it is, so we have to understand, how are we going to connect into that network? One of the things that you're going to want, and gets into the weeds, is the access points here are need a separate VLAN or something, because you don't want these access points to have access to the internal town networks of any kind. That gets into the details of the network design. But the first thing is to understand what the connection is, where is it?
Yeah.
From there, where do we want to put the access point, and what do we need to do to bring the two together?
Yeah, my starting point would be to go back and find the number for the folks that have built the network. They're the ones, I think we pay the money every year. We were going to be paying the money every year to be ready to run out here and fix when the F-man is damaged, a car runs into a pole and that kind of thing.
That was Comtract, wasn't it?
Yes, Comtract. I'd probably give them a call once I had a little bit of groundwork and say, hey, do you remember that run we did down at the park, down at the Mill Villages Park? How did that work? Okay, we're talking about doing this, and so what can you tell me about that? And go on from there.
Yeah, that's the best starting point.
So,
Yeah.
so both parts of that can be done probably parallel. It's completely different groups of people that you're going to be dealing with. You have the infrastructure side as far as the fiber locations where the stuff's going to be connected to, conduits, electricity for places that you need to worry about that. But like what Dave just brought up, as far as the equipment, you mentioned earlier that you've been talking with the town IT vendor. There does have to be, once the stuff is connected to the fiber, just like what you're saying, that it doesn't just magically work. There's probably some programming that's going to have to be done to not only set up the network connectivity the way you want to secure it from the rest of the environment that it's connecting into, but also there's the whole public portal piece of this, and there's a lot of different options and choices and decisions as far as how you're going to even have users be able to utilize your free Wi-Fi, because they have to have some way of associating to the Wi-Fi. And there's a lot of options ranging from really cheap and inexpensive bad options, or up from there. But I think for that type of conversation, you'd need to have the IT vendor involved as far as how this is getting tied into the town network, or what part of the network. There's a lot of different network parts that tie into this fiber network in town.
When I spoke with the city of Boston, they had a public Wi-Fi network that put limits on filters where people couldn't access undesirable sites. And they also had ways to control the amount of data a particular computer was using.
Yes, all that is stuff that has to be programmed or configured. I guess that's, well, I guess we haven't really talked much about what the, like, have you identified equipment or a solution that's going to be, or are you still before that as far, you're just kind of been talking to what Boston, like the city of Boston's doing, but you haven't really identified the equipment or solution you're going to be using for this?
One, we're just to the point where we're trying to figure out, is it feasible?
Okay.
And then if it's feasible, we can worry about details.
Well, there's a lot of details.
Yeah.
But certainly it's possible. We have to look over exactly what we have to deal with.
Can we
Yeah,
contact
I had
the
a-
group?
I lost the thought,
Yep.
but I need to, well, okay.
Bob,
We're not
could
gonna,
we
we're not
contact-
gonna design it here. Okay, go ahead.
can we contact the person that you were working with? And, you know, it seems like there was some sort of contract in the past with the folks from the F-Man. Like, is this something that we can call them and ask if they can do this type of installation? For us?
Didn't I just say that we get started by me calling those people once we knew what we were talking about a little bit?
Yep.
I think I just said that.
Yeah.
Right, but is this something that they could install to, like, eventually? I was thinking, you know, instead of having to, you know, since they're so familiar, because I don't, you know, maybe I'm not understanding because I don't really, this isn't like my, you know, tech isn't my forte, but yeah, I mean, I would think if we already have, you know, we're already going to have a conversation with them about what we're going to do, and maybe they can be the ones to implement it because they already know the details, et cetera, that might
So-
make our lives easier.
So I guess based on what John just said a second ago, that you're really doing a feasibility study on how feasible it is. You're going to really have to, especially since you have only X amount of money. You said 26,000 available from ARPA funds for this. And right now you can't count on being able to pull money from the cable budget or any other budgets for this. I think you really have to start by identifying the pieces that we were saying earlier. There's really two parts to this, and both of them you really need to have the numbers as far as how much it's going to cost to make it be able to be done, to be determined if it's feasible within the budget that you have. The first part that Bob's saying that he can help you get started with is a very important part, because it's going to identify where and how you're going to you could get your stuff connected. You have to identify what the cost would be for running any additional fiber, power, whatever, and where it's located and where your location of the devices would be. But you still have completely separate from that, completely different group of people. You're going to have to be able to choose what your wireless public Wi-Fi solution is going to be, as far as the hardware, as far as the way it's going to how it's going to connect into existing network structure. If this is something that the town IT can help with, and they have an idea of where they're going to put it in, how they're going to safeguard it, and if there's any beyond the equipment itself, if there's any licenses that are required for any of the services you just talked about, as far as applying filtering or limits on bandwidth or such. All of that are things that get, depending on what solution you go with, could get factored into licenses or cost of the solution or product. And so depending on how dense you make the solution, as far as how many APs you do to cover the area, that cost could go up pretty quickly if you do it too dense versus others. So I think you really have two different parts of this project that both of them have to be fleshed out, that can be done independent from each other. The only part that the equipment part really depends on is going to be to understand where it's connecting in and where you're going to be locating them at each of the parks, and how many you're going to be doing for that. And generally you can figure that out from like a wireless survey or other things to determine what your density or your how dense you want to have the APs set across. But the most important thing is like what Bob said, this is not something that can be just done in a meeting. This is probably weeks worth of work to identify what would be needed, what the cost would be, and what order you would need to do some of this stuff in. This is a decent time period project that you would probably undertaking.
By decent time period, are you estimating 6 months or are we talking longer?
Depends how much time people dedicate to that. So something like this I can do on my university with dedicated resources in a couple of weeks, depending on if I'm having to pull conduit or like dig up streets or such. That could extend the time. One of the things you have to deal with pulling conduit or digging up streets or such is that you have to do it really during the summer. If you get into wintertime, it becomes much more difficult to start pulling stuff underground with in conduits and such, depending on their state. So you have a really locked timetable that you really need to focus on this. The other part of this is when you determine the equipment solution you'd go with, depending on what vendor you go with and what type of equipment it is, there could be significant supply chain issues with getting equipment. I've known for my own equipment for a lot of newer wireless access points that have started incorporating Bluetooth technology in them, which even if you don't get it for the Bluetooth, a lot of them have now started incorporating Bluetooth within them for various reasons. That because of chip shortages having to do with those Bluetooth components, a lot of the major vendors have long lead times to actually get equipment in. Some of my stuff actually took 14 months for me to get access points in recently for a project. So, so your timetable really is going to depend on what all you're going to be doing with this.
Yeah,
The only way you're going to find that out is by starting to do the basics that what Bob recommended as far as tackling the you really should have one project group and probably have within it have two subgroups that come from that basically focus on the different components that you can meet outside of like these committee meetings, that you're not locked into just like once a month. This is something that you probably need to have regular correspondence and movement of a project, like a traditional project to move this forward in any time period. And so your first steps are going to be to probably identify who it needs to be, including the cable committee, like Bob, people that the contractor that support the F-man, as well as the IT vendor for town. And maybe other people maybe needed to be added as it goes on. But the first part is starting to set that up and have someone probably dictate what the project scope is and start figuring out what needs to be done as far as steps from there. None of that can be done on this call, really.
right. But by the way, we don't have any conduit. The only conduit we have is running
At
from
the common, from the box to
I'm
the
not
gazebo.
sure- I'm not sure how any of it gets into the common, but yeah, no, the only conduit we have in the system, I believe, is from Providence Road, in front of the school, underground past the cable studio, up to the schools and into the municipal center.
So Bob, it's all carried on telephone wires, basically,
It's carried on. This was a
or
big,
telephone poles, right?
this was a big deal. Made the project take a lot longer. It's carried on the pole in our, everybody owns a place on the pole. The power company owns the top, and the phone company owns the bottom, and the cable system owns the next one, and then we got the other one. But we went around and around back then about, are we going to have permission to get on the poles?
So we have permission to be on the poles?
That's
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Okay. Because I was gonna say there's 4 poles in the
Don't
park.
ask.
That would be a perfect place
No,
to put a Wi-Fi, right?
We're at most gonna get onto a couple more poles.
Mhm.
Maybe not even, a few more poles. Maybe not even that. Just let's
You really need to table this and create a move forward plan, because this is a lot we've been talking about this for like 40 minutes or something, or maybe longer. And you're going to get diminishing returns from this particular conversation. I think you need to identify the start of a project team for this, for the at least the investigation of the feasibility study for this. And you've heard some recommendations from Bob and Dave as far as who to include in that. And that's probably the best place to start, is take this off of this meeting and start putting that together as far as a feasibility study. And I know there's members of this committee that would be happy to help however you would, you could use for that. But you really need more resources than just this to be able to determine the feasibility.
Let's identify who on the committee wouldn't be willing. That's what I thought. I had no idea it was that complicated when I got it done before. I had no idea it was that bad. I did spend a lot of energy on it though. But yes, we've got to do that. I think be really handy to talk, maybe, at least a couple of us, maybe Fiona or John, maybe Dave, or, whoever, Alan, talk to the cable committee at their next meeting. One reason is that then we are drawing in Mr. Berger, who is the one who is a really good place to be getting information and help from.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, your knowledge far surpasses mine as far as the fiber infrastructure in town. I know the technology, but I don't have really any of the knowledge about the background. And you also have better context to the cable committee. The part where I really could help was probably the second part, because it's something that I do every day. It's like literally what my job is. So I'm happy to help with the equipment side and working with IT vendor and whatnot for figuring that part out. But you're going to be a far better resource than I am for the fiber stuff.
I wonder how Dave feels, because he does a pretty good job of pulling things together.
Mhm.
And he has some contacts down at town hall too.
Yeah, I'm happy to help out in any way that I can.
Oh, and he's an engineer too.
Yeah.
I think we're all engineers, right?
That may be true.
Actually, I'm an architect now. Sorry.
Well, John,
I guess
just
I'm
not John, but I don't think John has engineering. But
No, but I sell engineering businesses.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I worked for Verizon for a
Yes.
long time. I know more about copper telephone technology than I do about, I worked on the fiber project as well, the Verizon fiber project. So somewhat familiar with some of that technology.
okay,
All right, so
So-
we'll work on that follow-up and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we just kind of like completely overloaded you with a lot of this.
I'll be honest. It's a little overwhelming. I think I get the gist of it, but I will be in touch with people. I know to talk to the cable committee next week and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think we were expecting a simpler solution and it to be not nearly as complex as it turned out to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
well,
but it might be doable. which-
yeah, I think we can see a path forward on this. At least, leveraging our existing fiber network. I think that's key to making this, at all possibly feasible. Is that, as I said before, we've got the fiber connection to the two parks. Maybe the cable committee will extend fiber to the Whitney Park at some point, whenever that makes sense, in which case we can duplicate the solution there. But if we focus on where we already have the fiber connections, we already have power, we even have some structures that we can leverage if necessary. Our next step is, working with the cable committee. We can look at, what exactly that network connection is, where it is, what kind of connection it is, and that will then kind of drive, the rest of the physical infrastructure part about it. And if we determine that that looks feasible, then we can, as Alan suggested, sort of in parallel, get to work on the networking part of the network design part of it, and all the things that go into that.
Um,
Okay,
With
that,
some-
that makes sense to me, actually, that was a good explanation.
Far better than my explanations.
All right.
I think, Alan, you're just such an expert.
With-
That I'm like, wow, you seem really, you
With-
guys are way smarter than me when it comes to this stuff, so.
with some luck, I may actually have a machine readable form of what was purported to be the final map of the system. Our vendor surely has that. But I have to, if I'm looking for it, I'm gonna be digging through files on this computer, so as long as it keeps running. Files that date back to actually before, when I was using a PC. So we'll see about that. But Fiona, if you can go across the hall and chat with Bob
Sure.
just a little bit, to get him into this and what's up, I think that'll be helpful.
All right.
Okay, yeah, I'll get on their agenda for next week, let them know, and then we can start moving on, once we meet with them, we can start moving on that first piece.
What I'm saying is tell Bob what's going on, and
Mhm.
we're gonna need his help, and engage him at this point as much as you
Okay,
can. Okay,
all right.
Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for the knowledge and the information you shared with us. We appreciate it. And we appreciate your willingness to share to work on the committees and the subgroups with us. Thank you.
good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay.
We'll keep in touch, and again, certainly let me know if there's anything, any way I can be of further assistance.
Yeah, well, who's
Will
in
do.
charge? I think you're in charge, Dave.
All right.
All
Thank-
righty, thank you all very much.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Fiona.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
I think the chairman should appoint himself the head of this.
I second that. Oh, wait, or is that a vote?
I move the question.
All righty. So we have one more agenda item, and that is the minutes of the previous meeting.
Move they be approved.
I'll second.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded that the minutes of the previous meeting be approved as drafted. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll put this to a vote. Alan,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Amar,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The minutes are approved. And we do not have any reason to go into executive session.
We adjourn.
Oh,
Seconded.
moved and seconded that we be adjourned. Motion is not debatable. Alan,
Aye.
Bob. I saw Bob's lips move. And Amar,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.